Good morning to everyone. And I thank the Public Diplomacy Division and Arpit for sponsoring this talk as part of the outreach diplomacy to educate the public at large about India's foreign policy. I congratulate the Kerala University for taking this visionary initiative to start a Latin America Study Center. And I'm so delighted to see that the government of Kerala has extended financial support to this Latin America Study Center. The people of Kerala have taken more interest in Latin America in comparison to other states in India, except for West Bengal. The interest of Kerala in Latin America is focused on Latin American literature, politics, and of course, football. I'm told at one time the 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez was a bestseller in Kerala. The Keralite writer called R.Viswanathan is known as a magical realism writer of India and is often compared to Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the Colombian writer who won Nobel Prize and who wrote that 100 Years of Solitude. The Kazakh village depicted in the story, magical realism story of R.Viswanathan is similar to the imaginary fictional small town called Macondo in the novels of Gabriel Garcia Marquez. The politics of Kerala has some similarity with the politics in Latin America, both the past as well as the present. Leftist ideology has played a key role in the politics of Kerala, also in Latin America. Che Guevara and Fidel Castro are considered as leftist icons in Kerala, and there's a lot of interest in these two leaders, besides other lesser well-known leftist leaders of Latin America. And it's not only the past, also in the present. Very interestingly, if you see geographically, Kerala looks like Chile, just a thin strip on the western side of the subcontinent here, and Chile on Latin America. And both had elected the first leftist, socialist, Marxist governments democratically in world history. In Kerala in 1957 and in Chile in 1970, the government of Allende. But both the governments had very short life and they were removed. And now in both Kerala as well as in Chile, you have leftist governments. And in Chile, the president of Chile is not only a leftist, but is a very young student activist called Gabriel Boric. His election has set a new paradigm in the history of Latin America, where people are tired of business as usual by the old traditional parties. And they have started electing new, progressive, young, innovative people. Football, of course, whenever there is World Cup, I see flags of Argentina and Brazil in various parts of Kerala. When Maradona visited Calicut, there was huge celebration. and the room in which Maradona stayed in a hotel in Calicut, and people go there for pilgrimage. And there is business too between Kerala and Latin America. There is a company called UST Global, an IT company from Trivandrum, which has set up operations in Mexico and are also expanding to the rest of Latin America. And they had not recruited, they had got Vincent Fox, the former president of Mexico. They had even invited him to Kerala and to show him their facility in Mexico. The company is doing well. Interesting complementarity and synergy. Kerala is the land of cardamom and has been exporting traditionally and historically. But somebody took these cardamom seeds to Guatemala in Central America, and they planted the seeds there, and they did very well. And today, Guatemala has become the largest exporter of cardamom in the world. It's kind of cardamom from Kerala, but I'm told the size of Guatemalan cardamoms are bigger than the size of the cardamom from Kerala. But in any case, the production and the price of Guatemalan cardamom is very keenly watched by the exporters of Kerala, because the world price is decided by what happens in Guatemala. On the reverse side, rubber was brought into Kerala from Brazil. And interestingly, in the last 5 years, Kerala has been exporting natural rubber to Brazil. There is a company called Mani Malaya Rubber Limited, which has been exporting natural rubber to Brazil. And of course, it's besides all these political, sport, and literary connection, what is more important is the people-to-people contact. And that has been happening. There's been a number of young Malayalis who are working with Indian and multinational IT companies across Latin America. Some of them are married to local Latin Americans and settled there. They are doing very well and giving a bit of a flavor of the Kerala culture across Latin America. One of the young men who went there is called Robin Kanatu Thomas from Trivandrum. He had a startup called Astret International. He got a kind of scholarship, kind of fellowship and sponsorship from Startup Chile in Santiago, which is run by the government of Santiago. They give $40,000 plus all kinds of facilities, infrastructure, and incentives for startups from around the world to come and do their work in Santiago. It's been going on for a dozen years. Young entrepreneurs, IT entrepreneurs from India have been going there, and one of them is this Robin Kanatu Thomas. There is also a filmmaker from Kottayam called Matti Kodat. He is also an IT guy. He went to a country called Honduras and fell in love with a Honduran woman, married and settled there. And now he has become a film producer and director in Honduras. He produces Spanish films. He produced a famous film called Amor y Frijoles, Love and Beans. I had seen the film. It's a very interesting one. He has made more films, and he also makes television serials. And interestingly, there are quite a few, I would say around 200 plus Catholic priests and nuns from Kerala. They are present in many parts of Latin America, from Chile to Mexico. They have a shortage, and our people have been more enthusiastic. So they are present across Latin America, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, everywhere. And a friend of mine called Dr. Natarajan Pillai, an ENT surgeon from Cochin, he has written 3 books on Latin America, basically travelogues. He has made 6 trips to Latin America so far, and he loves Latin America. And he has spent a total of 130 days visiting big countries, small countries like Honduras and El Salvador and Nicaragua. And he has written these 3 books in Malayalam. So this would open the eyes of the travelers from Kerala to go to Latin America next time. Now I'll come to our topic, relations with Brazil. But before going into the relations, I would like to tell you something about Brazil. What is unique, what is distinct, what is different, and also the major powers, including emerging powers. They had a president called Dilma Rousseff after Lula. She had gone to Vatican to call on the Pope, who is an Argentine. And as many of you would know, there is a rivalry, football rivalry, and also general egoistic rivalry between Argentina and Brazil. They keep teasing each other. They have lots of jokes about each other. So when this President Dilma Rousseff met Pope, the Argentine Pope Francis, and came out, so there was this journalist waiting for him, waiting to interview her. And the Argentine journalist, he asked, Madam President, what do you think about this Argentine Pope? Dilma Rousseff looked at him and said, yes, the Pope is Argentine, but the God is Brazilian. They are one step ahead. God in Brazil, that there is a saying that God is Brazil. The reason they say this is because God has given more blessings to Brazil as a country in comparison to most other countries. God has been extra generous, extra kind in allocating resources and blessing the country of Brazil with natural resources. For example, Brazil is a country which has the largest tract of fertile land for agriculture. They don't have mountainous areas or deserts or arid areas unfit for agriculture. I mean, the whole country from the top to bottom is very fertile land. And you throw any seed, it will grow. And you don't need even irrigation. For example, sugarcane, as you know, Brazil is the largest producer of sugar in the world. In India, sugarcane is a water-consuming crop, and you need a lot of water for sugarcane. But in Brazil, they don't have irrigation projects. It's just rain-fed agriculture. The rains come at the right time, and the sugarcane grows. Whereas in India, we do 3 raccoons, 3 crops from the same crop, from the roots. But over there, they do 5, 6 or more without any irrigation. So they are so lucky. And In India, in agriculture, we have problem of water for agriculture. Um, as we utilize more and more groundwater, the water level keeps going down. It's happening in Punjab, Haryana, Tamil Nadu, and this is going to be a serious issue for future production of agriculture production for India, and it is true of China also. And many countries face this water crisis. But Brazil is lucky. 20% of the world's fresh water resources are located in Brazil. So for a long, long time to come, Brazil has the water security, and they are not likely to face any water crisis. And whereas in India you have, and China you have, too much of population and very small holdings of agriculture. Less than a hectare is the average holding in India, and it's even less in China. So the farmer is unable to invest. He doesn't have sufficient resources to do innovation, investment, and to increase productivity and yield and production. But in Brazil, if you have 2,000 acres, you are a very small farm. People own 10,000, 15,000, 50,000 acres of land. Because the land holdings are large, the farmers are able to do innovation, invest, and do proper soil management and agribusiness management, and they produce a lot. And the yield, as I said, is much higher there. Like, for example, soya, which we grow in Madhya Pradesh. Per hectare, we get 1 ton per hectare. But in Brazil, minimum they get 3 tons per hectare. And it goes up to even 4 tons per hectare. And Brazil still has cultivable surplus land of a minimum of 40 million hectares. And if they start using all the land, of course, without touching the Amazon, they would be able to feed easily another billion people in the world. And Brazil, that is why it is known as agricultural powerhouse and agricultural superpower. They can, another advantage is that, you see, you have, right now you hear a lot about Ukraine. Ukraine and Russia are also agricultural powers. They have wheat and sunflower oil, which we import. Now we have issues because of the war. Now, in these countries, as well as in US and Canada, which are main agricultural producing countries, you cannot have 3 crops because in winter, you cannot grow anything there. It will be snow and frost. So they can have maximum 2 crops. But in Brazil, you can have right through the year, you can have 3 crops. No extreme heat or no extreme cold, and the weather is ideal and tropical and fit for agriculture. So they can be more competitive, and they can grow more, and they have this competitive advantage vis-a-vis the other agricultural countries in the northern hemisphere, which have this problem in winter. And besides the agricultural resources, Brazil is blessed with, as I said, fresh water and a lot of huge rivers, which means hydroelectric potential. Brazil has the largest hydroelectric power station in the world. It was built in the 1970s for 10,000 megawatts. And they have another 216 hydroelectric power plants. Put together, all these hydroelectric power plants supply about 70% of the power requirement of Brazil, which means renewable power. It's not fossil fuel like petroleum. And this is sustainable. So they have potential to produce even more power because they have not touched even 50% of the potential for hydroelectric power. And Brazil has minerals, abundant minerals, very rich. They have iron ore, they have copper, they have gold, they have precious stones, they have manganese, many other minerals which are needed for industries and the new high-tech products. And as I said, the climate is neither too hot nor too cold. But also there's another interesting comparison, and that is Brazil is not prone to any natural disasters like cyclones, earthquakes, volcanoes, like Japan has, United States has. Every year you have a hurricane season in Florida, and you have volcanoes in Central America and Chile, and even in Argentina when they erupt, they can cause a lot of damage. But Brazil is free from these natural disasters. And of course, on top of all these, they have most beautiful beaches. You might have heard of these famous beaches, Copacabana and Ipanema in Rio de Janeiro. And Brazil has a very long coastline. And also coastline where the beaches and the water are warm and pleasant. If you see the west coast on the Pacific side, like Chile, Peru, up to California, the beaches are not good because the water is cold from Chile to California, right through the year. Summer or winter, it is very cold. But in the Atlantic coast, the sea water is warm and pleasant. So the Brazilians are indeed lucky to have such a blessed country with so much of natural resources, ideal, pleasant climate without any extremities, without being prone to natural disasters. So that is why they say God is Brazilian. Now, with all these natural advantages, Brazil has become a very desirable country, very ideal country for people to live and work. That is why you find, whereas we in India, we all want to go to the United States or Europe, and we all always think that the other side is greener and better. Even in the desert, in Gulf, we have people going there to make more money. But the Brazilians don't care very much to go abroad, to go to Europe or United States, or to go outside for making money. They are happier being in Brazil than going outside. This is something unique, unlike, say, the rest of the Latin Americans, like the Mexicans and others. The Brazilians are the ones who are more rooted to their soil and feel at home and be happy in their own land. And it is this attractiveness which also helped the independence of Brazil. Many countries in the world, they fought for independence. They had wars of independence. They had a lot of bloodshed and violence and sacrifice to get independence. United States, or many countries in Latin America, Asia, Africa, of course, thanks to Gandhi, we didn't have much bloodshed, but still we had a bit. But Brazil is one of the few countries which didn't have to fight for independence. They just got it free because of this reason. Brazil was the colony of Portugal. When Portugal was invaded by Napoleon in 1807, the king of Portugal shifted to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, helped by the British. But after Napoleon was defeated, he was called back by the court in Lisbon in Portugal. The king was not very happy to go back because he liked the beaches in Brazil. But anyway, he went there. But he left his son called Dom Pedro. So the young son stayed in Brazil enjoying the beaches, and the old father went. And when the old father died, then the court in Lisbon said, son, you have to come back and be the emperor here in Lisbon. But the young Dom Pedro, he liked the Brazilian beaches more than Lisbon, so he refused to go. He declared independence. Brazil is an independent country. I am the king of Brazil. So that is how Brazil got its independence, by self-declaration without firing a shot, without any bloodshed, because the young king, he liked the Brazilian beaches, the Brazilian climate, and the Brazilian soil and other attractions of Brazil, and he didn't want to go back. And with all this, you find that the Brazilians as a people are different from the rest of the world in many respects. I find them as the most joyful, cheerful, colorful, and playful people. They are happy-go-lucky people, take life easy, they have a work-life balance. So even if you give $1,000, they won't work on a Saturday, Sunday. They are more sacred. So some of our companies, IT companies working there, they have a problem. They call them for overtime on Saturday, Sunday. The Brazilians said no. Because they have a song called Hoje é sexta-feira, traga-me cerveja. It means today is Friday, bring more beer. That's it. And thereafter it will be only Monday to the office. So generally, people take off during Friday afternoon to the beaches, and they don't want to take any overtime or any work. And they, like for example, like now it's over in Rio de Janeiro. It's the most colorful party in the world. The most massive, the biggest celebration in the world, both formally and informally. We have a Samba Dome, which is like a football stadium, where they have these colorful parades. And then for about 10 days, you will find people singing and dancing and drinking beer in all the streets and beaches. And they have the largest New Year party in the world on 31st December. The place where you have the largest number of people assembled to celebrate New Year is Rio de Janeiro. They have this stretch of Copacabana, Ipanema beaches. About 1 million people assembled there on the beaches, drinking beer, singing. They have music concerts. And nowhere else in the world you have such a big party. Any case, you can't do it in northern hemisphere because it's cold in winter, but not in the tropical Brazil. So that's why the Brazilians are so addicted to happiness and the good things of life. And so they have a saying that, what is the difference between heaven and hell, internationally speaking, where the French are the cooks, the Germans are the engineers, the British are the policemen, Swiss are the financial managers, and Brazilians are the lovers. And hell is the place where the Germans are the police, the French are the technicians, British are the crooks, the Swiss are the lovers, and the Brazilians are the finance managers. They were financial crisis. So Brazilians know their role in the world. They are not into finance or engineering or into policing the world, but the best things of life, the happiness. And they are also colorful people. I'm saying it literally because you have the best combination of black and white and and any number of shades to that. Brazil has the largest number of Africans, over 100 million. United States. Brazil is the only country which has more African population outside Africa after Nigeria. They have more blacks than anywhere else in the world. And then you have the whites who came from Europe. Of course, they're the original Portuguese, and along with the Portuguese, you also have other Europeans. You have Spanish, you have Italians. For example, Sao Paulo city has more people of Italian origin than the entire population of Rome and Milan put together. And there are a lot of German colonies and settlements, particularly in the southern part of Portugal. And you have about 1 million Japanese in Brazil. And it's the largest population of Japanese outside Japan. And surprisingly, these Japanese did not go with the Sony or Panasonic or Toshiba. They went in the early 1900s to work in the coffee plantations as agricultural laborers on a government-to-government agreement between the government of Japan and the government of Brazil. But of course, now they have graduated to middle-class professions like lawyers, accountants, and so on. But even now, in and around Sao Paulo state, you will find the people of Japanese origins are the largest producers of fruits, vegetables, and agricultural products. So you have this fantastic combination of whites, Japanese, and of course there are some Chinese and Koreans also, very, very few Indians, and the Africans. So there is, and the people mix freely. You know, Brazil hasn't seen any racial riots or any conflicts like you have in United States. They mix freely in sports and celebrations. Like if you see the carnival pictures and the videos, you would see the spectrum of colors, black and whites mixing freely and liberally. And they have the perfect blend of racial mixing, which is quite fascinating, and which makes the Brazilian people as more open-minded, and also they take equality very seriously. The Brazilian, even the poor Brazilian, some guy who lives in a slum or a laborer or a taxi driver, he does not feel that he is inferior to someone who is the president of Brazil. He will call the president by his first name. He wouldn't feel that, no, he is a great president and he should show respect and reverence and address him properly. No, he would feel equal to call the president by his first name. So it's a very interesting society in terms of color, joy, and equality. And also, they are a peaceful people. It's a peaceful country. Whereas all the other major powers of the world, they have had so many destructive wars. Brazil has not seen a war in the last 150 years. The last war in which they were involved was in 1870, when this little country called Paraguay declared war on Brazil as well as against Argentina and Uruguay. It's called Triple Alliance War. They had a crazy dictator in Paraguay who thought he could take on Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. Of course, he was defeated. Except for this war, Brazil had not seen any wars in the last 150 years. And they have not been invaded by anyone, and they have not invaded anyone. They have no enemies, and they have no border disputes. They have border with the 10 countries in Latin America. 10 countries, because it's a huge country spreading all across Latin America. But they solved all the border issues much before. There's a foreign minister called Rio Branco, the diplomat. He sorted it out. So now they have no border issues, no other territorial disputes or any other issues. So the greatest problem for the Brazilian army is to identify an enemy. They don't know who their enemies are. Each country has a defense doctrine. Like in India, we know who our enemies are. But the Brazilian army, in their defense doctrine, is unable to define who the enemy is. So they have no territorial ambitions against them, or they have nothing against anybody else. And also they are the only country among the major powers which does not have this problem of terrorism, fundamentalism. US has serious issues. You had 9/11. UK had, France had, Russia has, China has, India has, Germany has. I think only Japan hasn't had terrorism, except for Japan. All the other major powers, they are preoccupied about terrorism, which has become a serious security issue. But Brazil is completely free from the issue of terrorism, fundamentalism, or any existential threat. And with all these, of course, Brazil qualifies as an emerging power. They have a very large area, almost 3 times that of India. They have a sizable population of 214 million, and they have all the natural resources. They could be an agricultural superpower, and they have got a lot of energy resources. But more than that is that it's a country which does not care about the past and which does not have a future agenda. You see, many major powers, countries in the world, they have historical baggage, and that decides their foreign policy agenda. Like, for example, Russia. Russia has lost more people in the 2 world wars than any other country. They had suffered more than any other country because of the wars. And even before the world wars, Napoleon attacked them, and Napoleon and Hitler, and they all targeted Russia. So Russia is always worried about the existential threat, and so they have to be on their guard. That is one reason we have this Ukraine war. Now, China, which is a future power, was humiliated by the British and the French and the Americans and the Westerners in the past. So they are just waiting for a chance to settle scores with them, and they will do certainly. Now, Germany and Japan are defeated powers, and they have been kind of castrated. They are not allowed to have their own armed forces. But I guess sooner or later that has to change, and then they have to find their place within the top table. UK and France, they had suffered in the hands of Germany, so they would always try to keep Germany under control and would not allow any circumstance to create another world war. And also, some countries, they have agenda, they have ideologies, they want to push their line of thinking on other people. Like China wants to encourage authoritarian, even Russia for and they're more comfortable. They support regimes in Myanmar, regimes in other dictatorial regimes in Venezuela, Cuba, and so on. United States, of course, it uses various disguises. Like they had this war on communism. They used it to destabilize many countries in the world. They have this war on drugs, war on terrorism, war on corruption. These are basically tools which United States uses to destabilize other countries and promote their agenda and to control the world. And we have, in India, we also have a baggage. We have a baggage of Kashmir, and it will take another couple of generations to sort out that issue if at all it's going to be resolved. And we have baggage with China. And we were a colonized country, so we still have some hangovers of that. And we are, we see history and we see, oh, we were once great and we have to become great again. Now, Brazil is the only country which, only major power which does not have any historical baggage. It does not have any grievances. It does not have any complaints. It does not have any past to be ashamed of. And at the same time, it does not have its own agenda to impose anything in the name of ideology or any other issue. So that is why I say Brazil is distinct and unique as an emerging power among the other major powers of the world. And also some of the other issues which Brazil has advantages of. One, for example, Brazil does not have food insecurity or energy insecurity like China has, India has, Germany has, Russia has, or even United States has. We all, in our foreign policy and in domestic policy, this is a major input in policy making, the food and energy insecurity. We want to protect these interests. But Brazil, there are plenty of both, so they don't have that problem. And also, some countries have weaknesses, sensitive points, buttons, you touch them and they react. Like in any international conference, you will always see some Pakistani coming up and mentioning Kashmir, and the Indian diplomat quickly respond. And similarly, you find human rights is a sensitive issue for China. Anyone mentions human rights, then the Chinese are up in arms. And same with Russia. So major powers, they have hot button issues, sensitive issues, weaknesses. Like India, for example, when someone talks about self-determination, we become alert. Uh, so many countries have these vulnerabilities, weaknesses, and sensitive issues, but Brazil doesn't have. They don't care, and so they are neutral on most international issues. They are positive. They are forward-looking, and they don't have any agenda. That is why you find the Brazilian diplomats are well respected in international diplomacy in the United Nations. A particular agenda. And the interesting thing is they blend on both sides, on the side of the developed countries and on the side of the developing countries. Racially, they blend with the white Europeans and the Americans, and also with the colored people of Asia and Africa. So you know, so they are comfortable. They don't feel out of discomfort. They don't have any discomfort in sitting with the whites or with the blacks or with the developing countries or with the developed countries. They and besides all these things, one other thing which I find as distinct the case of Brazil is the courage, because they have no weaknesses, no vulnerabilities, no issues. So they stand up and speak the truth courageously. Like, for example, after 9/11, when the United States harassed travelers from other countries, making them stand in long queues, taking photographs with cameras and thumb impressions and all kinds of nonsense in the beginning. So we couldn't say anything. We had to suffer. But the Brazilians, they retorted. So they made a separate line in the immigration queue in the airports in Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, and Brasilia. Americans, you stand in this line. And they had one immigration officer with some very bad old camera. And so you take your time in making people wait, like the Americans do. And they taught them a lesson. And one of the American pilots, he showed the line, sign like this, the one which in America they used to insult people. And a judge put him in jail. So they taught a lesson to the Americans that if you can do to other people, and we can do to you what you do to other people. And in 2008, when the financial crisis happened, what's called as the world financial crisis, it was a nonsense. It was a crisis of America. It was an American financial crisis which became a contagion and affected the whole world. But it was an American crisis, starting from the subprime crisis. But no one had the guts to tell the Americans the truth. Only the Brazilian president Lula told the Americans, hey guys, it's not a financial crisis of the world. It was a crisis caused by the blue-eyed and blonde-haired boys in Wall Street. They were the ones who were responsible for the crisis. And he also told them in 2010, the world was coming out of the financial crisis in 2008 and 9. Many countries did not have any growth, still going through big issues. But Brazil grew 6%, one of the highest percentage of GDP growth in 2010, immediately after the crisis. And no banks or financial institutions in Brazil had collapsed because of the financial crisis, unlike in Finland and Iceland and Greece and Germany and UK. And Brazil made an IPO, initial public offering issue, of its company called Petrobras, which is the combination of Indian Oil Corporation and ONGC, the biggest petroleum company of Brazil, one of the biggest in the world. And they made an IPO of Petrobras in 2010, immediately after the world financial crisis, and it fetched $70 billion. It was the largest IPO ever issued in the world till that time. And President Lula, in his speech, said, "Hey guys, this world's largest IPO of this company, what was not issued from New York Stock Exchange, not from London Stock Exchange or Hong Kong or Frankfurt. It was done from Sao Paulo Stock Exchange." So only a Brazilian president can have the guts to tell the Americans this. And of course, then at that time when I was talking to my Brazilian friends, who are playful and like to joke. So how is your relationship with the United States? At the height of 2010, I was asking. So my Brazilian friend, he told me this story. It's like this. There's an American from Texas comes to Rio de Janeiro and falls in love with the Garota da Ipanema, a girl from Ipanema. You might have heard of this famous song. Falls in love with her and proposes marriage and marries and takes her back to Houston, Texas. So after reaching Texas, on the first evening, his American Texan billionaire guy, Macho, he calls the Brazilian wife and says, come and sit here. I want to explain to you the 3 Texan rules of our marriage. So the Brazilian wife said, yes, and si, senor. Yes, sir, please go ahead. Is that rule number 1? I'm the boss. Yes, sir. Rule number 2, I will do anything I like. I go out and do whatever I like, no questions. The Brazilian wife said, yes, sir, no problem. And rule number 3, as and when I come back home, even if it is, say, 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock, the food should be raw and we should be there. So the Brazilian wife said, no problem, all done. Then the Texan asked, do you have anything to say? She said, yes, si, senor. I have only one small condition. What's that? You see the bedroom there? There will be sex every night at 10 o'clock, whether you are there or not. So she taught a lesson to this macho guy from Houston, Texas. So that is how the Brazilians stand up to the Americans in international affairs and foreign policy. I will come to the India relations. India has a relationship with 192 countries in the world. And the relations are always based on mutual power, need, and threat. If it is China or Pakistan, yes, the relationship has to be different. In the case of United States, UK, or France, they do not want India to be independent and powerful and strong. They always want India to have insecurity and problems. They can control us and they can sell arms to us. And they don't want to see India as a power. They have an agenda. Then you have neighbors, we have to be nice, we have to be extra generous. But Brazil comes in a totally different category. Brazil does not need anything from us. Brazil has no inferiority or superiority complex with us. So they are a peer. They are an equal partner. They have the same set of challenges, issues like poverty, illiteracy, all the developmental issues. and they have the same potential like India to become a major power. So it's a relationship of equality. That is why I would say that Brazil is an ideal partner, a strategic partner with whom you can have equal relationship. You can share experiences, and we can work together with common agenda in the global affairs. But of course, the relations are not the best. We got independence in 47. Brazil has been independent since 1822. But the relations were not great in the past because of Brazil's. We were a colony in Brazil, of course. Even after our independence, Brazil had military dictatorship, economic crisis, and so on. So we didn't take Brazil seriously till democracy was restored in 1985. Brazil, even after restoration of democracy, Brazil went through economic fluctuations, volatility, till about 1994 or so, when they had the new currency called the real, and that stabilized. And thereafter, the politics has become stable, and the economy has also got strong fundamentals and has been growing without much volatility. So we have started taking Brazil seriously only from mid-1990s onwards. And on their part, the Brazilians have started taking, they didn't care very much for India in the past. They thought India is a poor country, nothing great, nothing to be gained. But from after our economic liberalization in 1990s and India's emergence as a kind of IT power and generic pharmacy for the world, and as an emerging power with a large market for their exports, they have started paying attention to India. So our relationship has started growing seriously and systematically only from the mid-1990s. And of course, now both the government as well as the business, they are discovering the synergies and complementarities between the two countries as powers and as business partners. Brazil is the largest trading partner for India in Latin America. Can I take 5 minutes? Okay. We exported $6 billion last year, this 21-22. And our exports to Brazil are more than our exports to Thailand or to France or to Japan. We think that they are bigger trading partners. It's not true. And we imported about $5 billion from Brazil. Brazil has a small contribution to India's food and energy security. We have been importing edible oil, soybean oil. Now with Ukraine, we will start importing sunflower oil also. And there's scope for us to buy pulses from Brazil in the long term. Now, India has a perpetual shortage of pulses. We have been importing over 5 million tons from Canada, Myanmar, Australia. So Brazil has the potential to supply pulses. So edible oil and pulses, which are in perpetual shortage in India, so Brazil can contribute by supplies. And also, fruits and some specialized agricultural products, and even chicken. For example, there is a Brazilian company which has been wanting to export chicken. So they can contribute to India's food security in the long On the energy side, Brazil is one of the large exporters of crude oil in the world. And India has been buying crude oil from Brazil for the last about 10 years or so. And to be India's food and energy security in the long term. And Indian companies have started doing business in Latin America, established operations, they have made investment. For example, there is a company called UPL, United Phosphorus Limited from Mumbai, in agrochemicals. This is the largest Indian agrochemical company. Largest Indian agrochemical company. But today, they have more business in Brazil than in India. They do $1.2 billion of turnover in Brazil, while in India it is 6,000 crores, which is less than $1 billion. There is Aditya Birla Group. They have turnover of another $1 billion. They have aluminum plant, they have cotton black. Now, IT companies, TCS and others, they have about 15,000 Brazilians working for them in Portuguese and in English. And you have Indian pharma companies which are exporting about $350 million every year, and it is growing. And some of the major companies, they also have plants in Brazil to produce for the Brazilian market, as well as for exports to the rest of Latin America and to United States. And we have cooperation with Brazil in agriculture, energy, space, and even culture. A lot of Brazilians, thousands of billions, hundreds of thousands of Brazilians are interested in Indian culture, yoga, meditation, gurus. A lot of our gurus, including Amma from Kerala, Ravi Shankar, they all have thousands of followers in Brazil. There is a Brazilian called Fernando de Oliveira who came to India, has become a yogi and has become an authentic guru in Rishikesh. And his name is now Prem Baba. And he has ashrams in 12 countries in the world, including United States, Switzerland, and Israel, and France, where he talks about Indian philosophy, Indian wisdom, Indian meditation in Portuguese and in English. And this is amazing for a Brazilian to be disseminating Indian wisdom and Indian traditions and Indian culture to the world. Happy-go-lucky Brazilians. And of course, the Brazilians, as I said, they are smart and innovative. There's I knew somebody called Cecilia Angelon, a lady from Sao Paulo. She went to London looking for a job when she was a young girl. And she got a job as a shop assistant, sales assistant in a shop run by a Malhotra in London. And so Cecilia Angelon became Cecilia Malhotra. And then she took him to Sao Paulo, Brazil. And she wanted to do some business with India to keep up the Indian connection. So she started importing henna powder, which used for hair coloring. She imported and sold it in Brazil. The business picked up and she branded it as Surya Henna and sold it to other countries in Latin America. And then she stopped importing henna powder from India. She started importing the raw materials, the ingredients from India. She made her own powder, her own brand called Surya Henna. And she started exporting to Latin America, to United States and Europe, which is a $20 million business. And guess what? And she is exporting Surya Henna hair color to India also. It is marketing them in India. And she wants to produce in India for exports to Southeast Asia, to other countries in the region. But more than the bilateral issues, we, as I said earlier, we have much more to do with Brazil as a partner to promote our common agenda in the global forum, in the United Nations, in WTO, and in other multilateral fora, where Brazil is a solid partner to sit with, to discuss, to agree, and push common agenda between India and Brazil and the development agenda of the developing countries. So they are, Brazil is a true strategic partner for India in the long term. But anyway, I started the lecture saying that God had blessed Brazil more generously than he did for the rest of the countries. So the other Latin Americans went and complained to God. Say, you are partial. You gave so much to the Brazilians, to Brazil. So they complained. So the God said, wait. And he gave Bolsonaro to Brazil. Okay, thank you very much.